Oh, it didn't load the intro. Play. We're live.
We are live. Well, excuse us. The Yahowah vlog normally begins with an 18-second intro, and we have lots of time to get our act together. But in this time, it was, oh, by the way, we're live. This is the south end of a Wookiee looking north, quite literally. And we're here to continue our series on Return to the Garden. I do have a new implement here on the show. This was made by Patty Bowen. As I understand it, that arrived late yesterday or early this morning. Leah brought it to me. Yahweh's Chokmah Choter is on one side. The presentation of the Choter in Yahweh's voice, and Yasha'yah 11 says that the Choter has the spirit of Chokmah, which means that it is he's an intelligent fellow. The fact that he is a Chokmah Choter, since he's the one and only one, I'm glad that he is Chokmah. On the other side, she has been quite clever and presenting many of the things that are related to this job. The moon is a part of the action because the Choter is the lesser luminary reflecting the greater luminary's light, who would be Dowd. He's one of the three central players in God's story. There are three animals that are depicted as men that play central roles in the fulfillment of the Moed Mikre. And one of those is the bull, who is sacrificed on Taruw'ah. He is also the Adamah Parah. And as we turn here, we have the microphone of the Yahowah blog and also the books of Yada Yahowah. So I thank you for my special glass for this this program. It is always already Wookiee approved. Now, by recap, so that you have an idea where we are. About a month or two ago, I was given reason to return to the story of Eden and what transpired there. And when we did, we made a number of profoundly important discoveries, unheralded discoveries, things that no one had ever considered previously. One of those is that Eden is a microcosm of planet Earth, and that God is going to return the entire Earth to the conditions experienced in Eden, and will do so on Taruw'ah less than 8 years from now. This will be the 23rd and 24th of September of 2033 in year 6000 Yah. And when he does, he will do the same as was existent in Eden's, wiping out all traces of religion and politics and militarism and anti-Semitism and conspiracy. And then a select few will be allowed back into the garden, and those will be determined by the sacrifice of this bull here that we see on the back of the Choter's cup. Now, not only did we recognize these things, which are exceedingly profound, we also learned that it was God, Yahweh, who caused the fall of man, not something man did. It was actually man's crimes of omission more than commission. So this initial sin that must be expunged has nothing to do with the story. The fact of the matter is that Yahweh was bored with Adam. Adam didn't pass muster. He was not interesting. He did not listen. He did not engage and make a contribution, and Yahweh wanted him to work with him. He did not respond appropriately, and he proved himself unreliable. He showed no signs of growth and no indication that if he stumbled, he could recover, proving himself reliable and worthy. And therefore, there was no chance that Adam could ever reach the point that God could take him off of this planet and share the universe that he had created with him, which is really the intent. And so there would be a rebooting. There'd be a chance, a 6,000-year chance for us to get our act together, discover the true meaning of this story in the Garden of Eden, and for us to listen to Yahweh finally, for us to engage, doing what he wants accomplished, for us to show that man can stumble and fall and get back up and prove himself worthy, and that man can be observant because God wants to show off the universe, and there's no purpose in doing that unless the person he is taking along for the ride is also observant and explorer. So this was a fairly profound series of discoveries because it shapes what we must achieve to be among those that God is going to afford this marvelous opportunity. Otherwise, no one's getting off this rock alive. The earth is fine-tuned to protect and to shelter life, just as was the garden, and they are exactly the same. The other thing that is, of course, interesting is that the basis of Gan, garden, and the basis of Sukah, shelters, is the same. Their actionable roots are as identical. They speak of a sheltered and protected garden that is conducive to life. And therefore, we're going to see the fulfillment of this return to the garden take place on Sukah. This will be the 7th of October, a Shabbat, of course, in year 6000 Yah 2033, 15 days after, I should say, the restoration of the conditions of Eden across the entire planet. So these are all very profound insights, but there were even more, and that we came to recognize that the tree of lives represents Dowd. He is the same individual that Yahweh calls the greater luminary in the preceding chapter of Bereshith Genesis, when he is talking about the 4th day of creation. Dowd became the tree of lives because he was the one who, in his second of 3 lives, fulfilled Passover, opening the doorway to life. Heretofore, that has never been a conclusion deduced or shared by anyone. We also came to the conclusion that the tree of knowledge is these series of books called Yada Yahowah. There's 35 books in this series of Yada Yahowah. Yada means to know Yahweh, and they are all free in the library at yadayah.com. Not only that, we became aware that Yahweh's presentation of what is probably the most important prophecy for our time, that of the Choter, spoken of in Yahweh's voice in the 11th chapter of Isaiah. It is the most comprehensive prophecy in terms of the arrival of an individual that you will find anywhere. It's also repeated in the 14th mishlei, or proverb, written by King Dowd. And it is about a Choter who is a stem, who has roots that are deeply entrenched, who is a Natsir, which is an observant branch, who is in fact the Etzah, the tree, providing the comprehensive counsel on Diath knowledge. So the Choter is in fact the tree of knowledge. You're listening to him now. Lots of insights for a return to the garden, none of which were previously heralded, all of which are profoundly important. So now, as we have moved through this story, one of the things that we just heard God say is that Adam and Chawah, prior to embarking on eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and I should also tell you that the tree of knowledge is actually the most important character in this story. It is representing a man. It's most of God's symbols represent men. And the tree of lives, while massively more important than the tree of knowledge, is mentioned. It's just mentioned in passing, and all the focus remains then on the tree of knowledge. And that before Adam and Chawah imbibed and bit into the tree of knowledge, they didn't just take a bite. They continued to devour everything they could. They were naked, wearing nothing but a smile, and they were comfortable in God's presence that way. It was only until such time as they had done precisely what God asked them not to do that they were uncomfortable being naked and exposed in his sight. Now, this is important because religions and the religious are all fixated on what one wears and of hiding, particularly the female form, when God's got no such issues. And the fact is, you probably are not ready to be invited back into the garden if you're fixated on religious dress or on modesty, because you have to be ready to be fully exposed to Yahweh. fully exposed to God before you'll be comfortable in his presence in the garden. The other thing we learned is that the parting shot of what transpired in the garden prior to Yahweh's rebuke and his questioning of Adam and Chawah was that God said that it's important for a man to walk away from his mother and father and to be with his woman. The reason this is important is that it is a departure where, as I've said, I'm the first to recognize that man did not cause the fall of man, nor did woman. It was God that caused it. And he did so because he wanted us to have the opportunity to demonstrate that we could be interesting companions. And as he does that, he is leaving man to his own devices. And this is important for us to understand that we are now in a position where we have to demonstrate our worth. And to do that, you have to walk away from the family of man. This is the very thing that God spoke to Abraham about as the prerequisite for the covenant. You have to walk away from Babel, which is the integration of religion and politics into one's life. And you have to leave your father's house, which is very much like the statement that God just shared here in the second chapter of Bereshith in the Torah. So we're being set up for what would be required to be part of the covenant. And central to that today requires listening to the voice of Yahweh. So here's what we read next. Then with ongoing implications over time, they actually heard, Wah Shama, they, masculine singular, as in mankind, would hear with the benefits of listening continuously playing out. This is the call imperfect, third person, masculine, plural, that which pertains to the call, the voice of Yahweh Almighty, as he independently and on his own initiative, unaffected by any other influence, was traveling about pursuant to Gan, the enclosed and sheltered garden, this covered and protective enclosure for life, concerning the Ruach spirit of the day. Now, before we continue this particular statement, and this is the first part of Bereshith 3:8, let's analyze some of God's choices of nomenclature. First, Shama. This is the great catastrophe of religion, and it plays out more aggressively and negatively in Judaism. Well, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all have this problem. God never once asked us to speak to him, never once asked us to pray. He doesn't want us to bow down before him. He doesn't want us to worship him, but he most certainly never once asks us to pray. But he quite often asks us to Shama, to listen. Now, Jews screw this up when Yahweh in Dabarim, the 4th chapter, he's telling Jews, he says, Shama, listen, Yahweh, your God, is one. And Jews, rather than saying, well, okay, Yahweh is God's name, and there's just one of him, and we need to listen to him, they talk over him. They turn the Shama into a prayer and talk over God rather than listening to him, and then they even replace Yahweh's name with Adonai, the Lord. It's a shame. Paul, in creating Christianity, said, pray without ceasing, which means don't listen to Yahweh. And of course, Judaism is all fixated on multiple prayers every day, and none of them are really a prayer. They're a confession of submission to Allah, where you bow down in humility and put your nose in the dirt. It is it's a shameful thing, but that's what Allah wants, because Allah is Satan. So with ongoing implications over time, they actually heard. Now they were listening. But it's the they is masculine plural, so it is actually speaking of another time. What pertains to the Kol voice, the Kol voice of Yahweh is going to come up many times throughout the Torah and prophets. And in particular, the Kol voice of Yahweh is presented as a latter-day witness that God has empowered to clear the obstacles away, to raise a thoroughfare from our world, the material world, to the spiritual world of the heavens, where Yahweh resides. And so it is this call of Yahweh that calls out in this wilderness of death and deceit to clear away the religious obstacles that have cluttered the way to Yahweh, which is through his Moed Mikre. And so the call voice of Yahweh is an essential prophetic figure discussed throughout the prophets, and particularly in the book of Isaiah, Yasha'yah. He is of Yahweh. Yahweh is God's one and only name. If you do not know Yahweh's name, you do not know God. God does not know you. It is very easy to pronounce. The introduction of Yahweh's name was to Moshe. And at the time, Yahweh specifically said that his name was based upon the Hebrew verb Haya. Haya means to be. I was, I am, I will be. I exist. And Haya tells us how to pronounce the Y, the Yod, and the two Hay's in Yahweh's name. It's Hi-Yah. And then to understand the pronunciation of the Wah, which is the W, which is another vowel. Hebrew has 5 vowels and 17 consonants. All you have to do is look at the book that instructs us about the proper pronunciation of Yahweh's name. It's in the Torah. The O in Torah comes from the Hebrew Wah. Not difficult. So this is the voice of Yahweh Almighty, as he independently, on his own initiative, unaffected by any other influences, was traveling about. The verb is halak, but halak was represented in the hitpael participle, masculine singular absolute. Now what that means in the hitpael stem is that God was now independent of Adam and Chawah. He was there on his own initiative, not theirs. He was not affected any longer by what they were doing. They were separate. God was going to lecture them, and he was going to leave them. Pursuant to Gan, this enclosed and sheltered garden. This would be Yahweh's last visit to the garden. It was located where Lake Van is now in eastern Turkey. I think it's buried underneath the waters of Lake Van. It doesn't really matter in the fact that God's going to transform the entire earth to the conditions of Eden. But I think when he does, the original garden will probably be available to us to explore. I think it'd be fun for God to do that. He's that kind of guy. So I would expect that we will have tours of the original garden should we wish to go. It'd be fun to do. And the garden is a covered and protective enclosure for life. The earth, our planet, is specifically tuned for the same purpose. We, on this earth, have the ideal environment for life. In fact, as we realize all of the fine tuning that was necessary for life to exist on this planet, it is absolutely extraordinary. I've seen programs presented by scientists and physicists and the like, and they talk about the numbers, and you get to something in the range of 10 to the 100th power. I mean, numbers that are so astronomical they can't even be imagined in the human brain. For there to be another planet anywhere in our universe that is conducive to life. It's far more than just having the right size and type of star, of which our sun is perfect. It's much more than being just the right distance from that star, of which the Earth was 10% closer or 15% farther away, life would be impossible. It's more than just being in an orbit around that star at the right distance, because the orbit has to be round, circular, as opposed to elliptical, or it wouldn't work. It has to be that the planet is a rocky planet of not too great a size, not too small a size, and it has to have and maintain a molten core to have a magnetic field that protects the planet from radiation. Otherwise, it's not possible. It has to have water vapor in the air, which means the density of the planet has to be enough to gravitationally hold it there, but without the water vapor in the air, even with the magnetic field, life would not be possible because of the cosmic microwave bombardment of the planet. It has to have a moon that is abnormally large for the size of the planet. Our moon was actually created out of the Earth 4.5 billion years ago. A planet about the size of Mars hit the Earth, and the collision between the two created the Earth and the moon. A very unique situation. In fact, we don't see another combination of planet our size and moon our size, not only anywhere in our solar system, but anywhere in our galaxy. And it also has to have a gaseous giant placed outside of its orbit that is the distance that we find Jupiter and the size we find Jupiter. Otherwise, there's no vacuum cleaner out there to get rid of all of the harmful meteors and asteroids and comets that would otherwise destroy any chance of life on the planet. And it just goes on and on. It has to be in a certain range within an arm with a galaxy where it's about 3/4 of the way out from the center of a galaxy as we are from our sun. Any further out, and you don't get stars like the sun, you get red dwarfs, which won't support life, and you don't get any of the large quasars and neutron stars and that sort of thing that can explode and create the heavy elements. We're carbon-based creatures, so they don't exist if you go further out. And if you go further in, then the environment is just too caustic. When a quasar and the like stars explode, they would take all life away on the planet. So it gets too caustic as you move further in. And it can't even happen on a galaxy unless that galaxy is separated significantly from other galaxies, as ours is. And that planet has to have tectonic plates, or life is impossible. It has to have tides like we do, or life is impossible. It has to have the proper angle on its axis and proper spin rate between day and night. Can't be tidal locked as so many planets are. And it just goes on and on. It has to have this enormous wealth of water, which we uniquely do. And as I say, it's obvious that the Earth was finely tuned for life. And even with all of that tuning for life, the odds of spontaneous generation as opposed to intelligent design, particularly with the three-dimensional language of DNA, places the possibility of life emerging from matter at a far greater number. I think it's 10 to the 54th power is the best scientific explanation now, it's far less possible than if you would imagine a tornado that was whirling over a junkyard, magically creating a 747 that was flyable. That's not possible. And you should know that life from non-living material, particularly life form that can have a ready supply of food, have a means to process that food for energy, and have a means to replicate itself, it's not possible. And DNA is a language. Languages don't spontaneously generate. So there we are. It's life was conceived here, and we are a protective enclosure that is conducive to life. And you might as well admit this, because man with a physical body isn't going anywhere. Yeah, we can go to the moon, but a big deal. It's a 3-day cruise in a slow rocket. No, it's and even there, we can stay there 4 or 5 days, maybe pushing it at the extent. But the issues there is you're still exposed to the cosmic radiation. You get 14 days of utter darkness where there's no source of power. The regula, which is that super abrasive dust that exists on the moon, has an electrostatic property. It destroys everything. It cuts right through spacesuits. It destroys instrumentation. You could be there for a very short period of time, and everything that you're using would be absolutely destroyed. You can't land one spacecraft near the others because it would kick up this regula such that it would be unbelievably destructive. You'd have to ultimately build yourself a hut, no windows, an exceedingly thick earthen kind of door, going back into the Stone Age, if you will, to be able to survive the radiation. And if you're going to build something like that, that's an earthen hut out of the regula, why not just dig a hole in the ground on Earth? Then the view would be the same, right? And then you've got the issues of the human body can't continue to function in zero or lower gravity than what we experience on Earth, because everything falls apart. Our hearts weaken, our muscles weaken, our bones weaken, everything about us falls apart. So it just can't be done. So man is most certainly not going to Mars to live. You might go to Mars as a vanity project to die, but that would be it. So this is it, where we are. And it is equivalent to Eden, and God is offering, committed to returning the earth to the Garden of Eden. And those that will be there because they have listened to what we're talking about now, and they've availed themselves of what we're talking about now. Without this message and it being finally heeded and resonating among God's people, it wouldn't happen. Now, this goes on to say that it's not just pursuant to the enclosed and sheltered garden, but it's concerning the Ruach spirit of the day. Now, this is the first mention of the Ruach in the garden. And here it is after humankind has failed and is going to be booted out. The Ruach is mentioned in the creation account earlier, and it's the Ruach that Yahweh dispatches to expand the universe and to regulate it, if you will, to make certain that that light that he conceived is managed in an appropriate way. Matter of fact, it's just really an interesting thing to note that God said, "Let there be light." And I don't think people have a full appreciation what that means, because light is the very stuff that is later turned into matter. Energy and matter are the same things. They're just different amounts of the same thing. That's what E equals MC2 represents. That matter is a form of organized light, and that it is it's like the same amount of light and matter. You have to multiply matter by the square of the speed of light to equal matter. But here you go. The correlation between the two, matter and energy, is the square of the speed of light, because the speed of light speed is the governing factor of the universe. It is the thing that regulates the universe. It's not just that it is the universal speed limit, and it is. Nothing can or will ever travel faster than light. If something, a physical entity, were to travel faster than the speed of light, it would destroy the universe. It would have to become so large in terms of its inertia that it would consume the entire universe just to propel it. And it would exist in multiple places at one time, defying the laws of physics. But the worst part of the whole thing, if you were to move faster than the speed of light, you would unravel the very fabric of space-time, such that consequence would precede cause. And so cause and effect, the effect would precede consequence or cause if we were to travel faster than the speed of light. And it just is absolutely impossible to tear the human body apart if you even approach that speed and your spacecraft hit just a random hydrogen atom. It'd be like a nuclear bomb going off. Your body, as it approaches the speed, all matter stretches so that your entire body would explode. It is just, for every way you look at it, it is an impossibility. Just to propel something anywhere close to that would take all of the energy in the universe to even approach it happening. And even then, based upon that stretching of the fabric of time, it would destroy the object being accelerated to that point. And even at the speed of light, there's no part of our universe that we can visit. We can't even approximate it. The fastest we've ever created a spacecraft is one without a human, so that we could send it very close to the sun and slingshot around the sun, which would kill it if it had a human occupant. And that one is traveling at 0.1% of the speed of light. 0.1%. That's the closest we've ever gone. And we can't even approximate that at this point. And at this point, that would take us many thousands of years to even get to the first star. And there is no way to replicate humanity in space, and our bodies wouldn't survive the low gravity environment. It's a factual impossibility. We'll never get beyond this planet to live. As a vanity project, we could possibly get to Mars, but no one's going to live there. We can return to the moon, but no one's going to live there. This is the only place that we can live, and it is therefore designated as God's view of this will be our sheltered garden. It's also interesting that not only is light the substance of matter, not only is light the universal timekeeper, not only is light the means to regulate the universe, its defense mechanism really is light. It must make certain that no particle ever exceeds the speed of light, or it'd be the unraveling of the undoing of the universe. And it's the ultimate timekeeper as well. But also, information cannot pass from one place to another any faster than the speed of light. Even a quantum computer, it's still limited to the speed of light. So all of these things are absolutely fascinating. My favorite aspect of all of this, as we'll get back to the spirit of the day, is that what I've long stated is that when we get rid of our physical bodies, which means that you've got to get away from religion, because Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all believe in the resurrection of the body. That's counterproductive. If you have a body, you can't live on this planet. And you're still restricted. You can't go to the next dimension. It is only when you don't have a body and your soul is encased in light and energy that you have the opportunity to be enriched and empowered and enabled. And so when that happens, then we, in fact, can do what God is looking for man and woman to do, which is to be trustworthy enough that he can take us off of this planet. But here's what's the beauty of it. On a photon of light, let's say we had a photon of light that left a star that is 50 billion light years away. It did not take that photon 50 billion years to reach our eyes. Not from its perspective. From ours, perhaps, but not from its. You see, from the moment that photon of light left that star to the time that it reaches its ultimate destination, 0 time passes. So as light, we can move from one place to another in 0 time. So we can explore the entire universe under that basis, because we can get to wherever we want to go in 0 time. And so time is takes on an entirely different dimension when you are light energy than it does now. It's just such a fascinating study, and all of this is available to us through Yahweh's discussion here in Bereshith in the Torah. Now, as for the spirit of the day, the spirit of this day is that everything we have just considered about the garden is prophetic. It's prophetic of where we are, who we are, and what you're being invited to experience as the earth is returned to the garden. You see, I shared with you that the tree of knowledge in the garden is the Choter that is presented in the 11th chapter of Isaiah and in the 14th proverb of Dowd. This unique individual is the most ruach of all people who have ever lived. The Choter is given the 7 spirits of Yahweh. And so the spirit of the day is the tree of knowledge, who is the central figure in this story, because it is the tree of knowledge that equips people to recognize the toxicity of religion so that they leave religion, and then the truth about Yahweh so that they understand what Yahweh is offering and what he is expecting in return. And in particular, the tree of knowledge leads people back to the tree of lives, representing Dowd David, who fulfilled Passover, Matzah, and Boredom in his second of 3 lives in 33 CE, which was year 4000 Yah, exactly as God explained. Now, to be able to accomplish this at this late date and to reveal all of these insights that mankind has never considered before, everything I'm sharing with you now, no one has ever processed previously. No one. I mean, how does one guy come up with 10,000 unique insights that no one has ever perceived before and can show you how to derive them through the very words of God? And all of the people who have come before him haven't come up with any of them. It's because this individual was uniquely given the 7 spirits of Yahweh. The first of those is the very spirit of Yahweh. It's called the Ruach of Yahweh. And what that enables this person to do is to be the kol, the voice of Yahweh, to represent Yahweh at this time. And you might say, well, why doesn't God just speak for himself? Because that isn't the way he operates and isn't the way that man has chosen. Man was given free will. God appeared directly before the children of Israel at the base of Mount Choreb, gave them 3 days to get their act together, to prepare Moshe, introducing them to the fact it was going to happen. They had witnessed Yahweh's flame, his light on the top of Mount Choreb. They had seen Moshe come down on occasion, once with the tablets of stone, twice with the tablets of stone, broke the first set. And they saw him radiate. His face was glowing. They saw the man's confidence. And so he said, God said, I'm going to come down. I'm going to demonstrate tangibly that I am God and I am speaking to you, so they trust what you have to say. And this is very consistent all the way through the Torah. When God chooses someone to speak through, he tells you, I have chosen this guy to speak through. There's no question about it. The Choter is the most obvious of these people for the last 3,000 years. The person that God says the most about is Dowd David. He is actually the person that is identified in the 18th chapter of Devarim, known to other people by its Greek title, Deuteronomy. But second unto Dowd, the most prophetic ink is describing this Choter, this voice of God, the herald of Dowd, the lesser luminary, the tree of knowledge that points people back and equips them to capitalize on the tree of lives. And this individual has the very Ruach of Yahweh. That has happened very, very infrequently. In fact, I don't think there's another place where it actually says the spirit of Yahweh. We know the Ruach came upon Moshe, it came upon Dowd, and it came upon a few others here and there along the way, but it's never expressed as the spirit of Yahweh. That's profound. And now what I was going to say, when Yahweh came to speak directly to the children of Israel, he was represented by fire, because God won't fit into a man. This idea that God can be a man like is in Jesus Christ is utterly stupid. God won't fit on our planet, much less in our solar system, much less in our galaxy, and even in this entire universe. He has to be larger than the universe he created to have created it. So God is a dimension beyond our 6-dimensional universe. So for God to project himself into our presence, he has to do it in some manner. And the way that he did it there is he created a fire. Fire represents light and energy, and therefore is a really ideal metaphor for him to convey his existence to us. So he appeared as a fiery light in their presence, and he spoke in his voice to them, and he didn't get a full sentence into it before the children of Israel says, no, you go away, man. We're going to die. They couldn't handle being exposed to God. They didn't want to hear directly from him. They told him to go away, to shut up. They never wanted to hear from him or see him again. Now, God didn't get angry at this. Surprise, surprise. God said, "Hey, no, I'm with you on this one." I happen to agree that makes absolute and perfect sense. You will never see or hear from me again. From that point on, God's revelation to man was through men. He would speak through the likes of Moshe, Yasha'yah, Hosea, Zechariah, particularly through Dowd, through Samuel, and finally, in the end, through his Choter. So that is what God has chosen. That's what man has chosen. That is the way it has always been. It's the way it will always be. When Dowd returns as King of the universe on Kippurim, the 2nd of October, 6:22 p.m. in Jerusalem, as the sun sets on the 2nd of October, 2033, in year 6000 Yah, when he returns with Yahweh, God said he's going to be Elyon, the very influence of God in his presence and in our presence. So God is going to continue throughout eternity to work through individuals of his choosing. Dowd is the most important of them. This fellow named the Choter, this tree of knowledge, is high up there on that list, but way below Dowd. And so the spirit of the day is the fact that the tree of knowledge, the Choter, which is synonymous with the tree of knowledge, God made that emphatically clear in the 11th chapter of Isaiah, that the two of them, similarly named, filled with the Spirit. That is the spirit of the day. The Choter, in addition to the spirit of Yahweh, has the Choter of the spirit of Chokmah. That's why it says there, the Choter, Chokmah Choter. He has the spirit, and that means intelligence, by the way. It's often translated wisdom, but I think the intelligence is probably a more accurate rendering of Chokmah. It's how Dowd introduces the 14th proverb, begins with talking about the Choter's wife and said she is really smart too, but goes through and some 6 or 7 times talks about from his perspective, and therefore God's perspective, the Choter is uncommonly intelligent. That's why he's able to write these kinds of books to lay out, for example, the next 8 years on this planet and tell you exactly what's going to happen, where, when, and why, so that you're prepared for it, which no one previously has been able to do. I mean, he identified the fellow that Christians have been searching for, that is the Antichrist. He has told you the exact day that God is going to return. He's told you the exact day the witnesses are going to be there, when the Torahless one is actually going to make his diabolical decree about him being a god, when he's going to change the schedule of the Moed Mikre. All of that is laid out. The first day of the time of Jacob's troubles, when Israel's going to be forced to capitulate its heart and soul to create a Fakistanian state to make the nation more vulnerable, when Alaska Flood 2.0 is going to happen. All of that I've laid out for you in this book. The day the 2 witnesses arrive, the names of the 2 witnesses, it's all there. And it's all there because the Choter has been given the Ruach of Chokmah, but he's also been given the Ruach of Be'en, which happens to be my favorite of all Hebrew words. Be'en means that you can make connections between things. It's the ability to comprehend, so that you look at, you develop knowledge by processing information intelligently and developing a foundation of knowledge, and then finding the connections, the relationships between things, such that you can go from knowing to understanding. Knowing is very powerful. Understanding is infinitely more valuable and empowering and enlightening and enabling than simply knowing. And he is given this spirit of understanding. Then this is is not the end of the list. I mean, that's already three: the Spirit of Yahweh, the Spirit of intelligence, the Spirit of understanding. The fourth Spirit is the Spirit of this day, Etzah. Tree is Etz. The tree of knowledge is the Etz Dayath. Etzah expands the concept of Etz tree such that this tree, Etzah, is providing comprehensive counsel and advice regarding the entire story that God has portrayed, so that you know it from beginning to end and all of the important dates along the way and everything that's important and that has never occurred prior to this series of books, of which there are 35 free, again, at yadayah.com, and until the Yahowah blog. So this is the Etzah, the full expression of that tree. Then we reach the fifth of those Ruach that is afforded to this Choter. And it is the same Ruach that made Dowd so extraordinary. It's the Ruach of Gabora. Gabora is confidence, conviction, capability. This Choter is going to be so uniquely confident and capable that he's going to drive a whole lot of people crazy because they're insecure, and a super confident individual it just absolutely drives the insecure people up a wall. But that's what's needed now. The person that's speaking as the voice of God, as this Choter, needs to have confidence, needs to be bold, and needs to be resilient. And so he's given the Spirit of Gabora. And then, of course, the sixth of the seven spirits of Yahweh fully identifies the Choter with the Etz Dayath, the tree of knowledge, because it is the spirit of Dayath, and that is the spirit of this day. And all that leads to the seven of the seven spirits of Yahweh, which is the spirit of Yara, which is to develop a respect and admiration for Yahweh. That is the spirit of this day. Of course, in your religious publications, they'll say it is the cool of the day. Ruach does not mean cool. It means spirit. Therefore, the man, whom we call Adam, it's just Waha Adam. Adam means red, earth, and man. As Adamah would be the bloody red man of the earth, with the ending expanding our understanding of the word, because this is prophetic and speaking of the Adamah Parah, who is the productive bull that is bull up here, the productive bull who is a bloody red man of the earth, because he is the man from Edom who is sacrificed to save many. So therefore, Adam, this man, and his woman withdrew as he moved away by himself. So he moved away would mean that the man moved away from everybody, from Yahweh and from Chawah. Chawah is actually the name of the first woman conceived to help man. It's another insight. Man was created in God's image. When God gave a man a nasama, which is a conscience, the man would have had all the normal features of a human outside the garden. He would have had a soul like every human outside of the garden, but he was created in God's image with a conscience, a nasama, which enabled him to process information rationally, cogently. It made man intelligent, gave him the capacity to be intelligent anyway, and to have a conscience, to be able to discern between right and wrong, good and bad, productive and counterproductive, to be judgmental, to be discerning, discriminating. It's all things that artificial intelligence is incapable of replicating. A nasama is better than a bunch of processors and circuits. I can promise you that. And so that has the man withdrawing. I was going to say that not only was man created in God's image, woman was not created in God's image. Woman was created in man's image, according to the text of our Creator. Also, man was created to work with God, to make a contribution to the relationship, to listen to God, to be observant of things around him, and therefore contemplative based upon what he had seen. Woman was created to help the man. These is the word. It means to help. She was specifically created to support man, while man was created to engage with God in the ways that I have just articulated. The fact is that put together, there was synergy, and this would be an ideal relationship for man, for woman, and for God. But we very quickly destroyed what God was trying to create. Anyway, so it says the man withdrew. He moved away by himself, no longer assisted, influenced, or helped by anyone, which means that Chawah was not helping him, which was her design purpose. It says Chawah. He decided to retreat and leave by himself. Hitpael, which means that he was not being acted upon by any other influence. He was on his own. Imperfect means unfolding implications over time. Third person masculine, which means it was he that was moving away and withdrawing from the presence of Yahweh, Almighty God, in the midst of Hagan, the sheltered gardens Etz tree. Now, many would change Etz to the plural form and say in the midst of the garden's trees, but it's singular. It's masculine singular, as a matter of fact. Adam just didn't get lost among the trees. He went back to the tree of knowledge, to the central figure and central character throughout this story, which is the tree of knowledge, the Etz Dayath. And tree here is just such an interesting word also, because it's not only a productive, upright life with firmly embedded roots and branches, which reach up to absorb the light, presented exactly like the Choter is presented in the 11th chapter of Yasha'yah, Isaiah. But when we look at the Etzah version of Etz, it means to provide counsel and advice through diligence and effort on the entirety of the plan for the purpose of developing a backbone while overcoming challenges to advocate the proper response. And this is important because the very thing that Adam didn't do is show some character, overcoming the challenge of being offered the fruit and saying, no, God said we shouldn't eat it. Or even if he had taken a bite to accommodate the woman, said, God says we shouldn't continually do this. Let's just set it down and it'll be okay. And it would have been, but he didn't. So that is important and related to the spirit of the day. We find Etz, which is the basis of Etzah, which is the counsel on the entire story that is provided by the Ruach to the Choter. So clearly there was a lot to unpack in that last statement that is important to our understanding and to see why everyone is behaving as God is depicting them in this story. And after we had had the characters described and we've watched them interact and they've been introduced along with their attributes, we find that God's solution to being unimpressed by the man is being laid out here. His cold voice would convey his solution. The descriptive title, of course, belongs to the Adamah, the man of the earth. God has twice spoken of Yada in this narrative, and Yada is the one who knows. That is why it is Yada Yahowah. And he is serving as the Etz Dayath, this tree of knowledge, as the Bashar herald of Dowd, the tree of lives. Now, while it wasn't the man and woman who were listening, something we can deduce by realizing that Shama was presented in the masculine plural. Therefore, it's addressing men and women of another millennia, mankind in another time, our time. Nevertheless, by having devoured some of its fruit, Adam and Chawah should now have been at least somewhat familiar with him, such that they recognized him. His cold voice would have shattered their illusions, however, just as he would the delusions later in life of the religious, the political, the conspiratorialists. I have written 13 volumes excoriating religion. Here is one of 5 that destroys the religion of Islam. Here is one of 5 that destroys the religion of Christianity. And I've written 3 that destroy the religion of Judaism. So he is a voice to proclaim what is wrong, injurious, doing something no one has previously done before. So this is the call of Yahweh, exclaimed through the prophet Yasha'yah, who would call out in the wilderness, prepare the way for man's return to God and God's return to man, clearing the obstacles that had been strewn in the path, most of which are religious or political or militant or conspiratorial or anti-Semitic. Additionally, based upon the Torah, we know that God is committed to speaking through men and not directly to men. Understand the difference? Through men, not directly to men. He tried the to men. It didn't work real well. We rejected that. And so ever since that time, it's been through men. Now, as for the other interpretation that they heard the sound of the Lord God walking, I remind you that even though the verb is halak and can be translated as walking, that Yahweh expressly stated that he appeared al, which is above the man, not next to him or beside him. Kol is properly defined as voice 4 times more often than it is rendered sound. And since Yahweh is a 7-dimensional being, should he want to interact with man using legs and feet and conveying the sound of footsteps over broken branches, the most he could have done would be to project his nephesh soul into a physical form for the occasion. But had that been the case here, he would have depicted his presence using the term he uses elsewhere, ish, individual, something we have not seen anywhere in this narrative. Instead, we are told that this day pertained to the Ruach, spirit of Yahweh, something men have corrupted to cool of the day. And this is to say that it is correct to conclude that God was speaking to and observing this man as if he were a pet in a cage, swimming around akin to a goldfish bowl. Now, affirming this, while a lock can be rendered walking, it is correctly translated coming and going, moving about, and traveling 3 times more often than it is presented as walking. Therefore, Yahweh is continuing to use this narrative to advance his solution and his lack of interest in the uneducated, inexperienced, unproductive, undisciplined, unmotivated, irresponsible, and self-entitled man. Yah's tree would have a voice. Yada Yahowah would become the Yahweh vlog. Now, should you disagree, that's your prerogative. But be aware, over the past 3,000 years, no one has known Yahweh better or spoken more accurately of him or for him. Even here, I'm the first to identify Dowd as the tree of lives, which was predicated upon being the first to prove that Dowd fulfilled Passover in his second of 3 lives, opening the door to life. And by properly reflecting the sun's brilliance, I became the tree of knowledge, the lesser luminary, the first to lead the world back to the Etz Chaim through the Etz Dayath. This is something Yasha'yah understood, but even the prophet Zechariah could not grasp this as he pondered the implications of the 2 trees flanking the menorah, the one next to the lights representing the first 3 mikre on one side and the other rooted alongside the fall mikre. Dowd on the spring mikre, Yada aligned with the fall. As a result, I'm the first to demonstrate that the Choter, Yahweh, foretold through Yasha'yah, is the Yada Yahowah, as a result of the Ruach spirit. Now, that in and of itself is among the greatest discoveries of our age, of any age, because it destroys all messianic connections, not only with the Choter, but with the garden, with the tree of lives, with the Torah, with the prophets. There's no room for a mythical Jesus in the midst of these truths that are so profound about Dowd and the role that the lesser luminary plays in reflecting the greater luminary's light, where the tree of knowledge leads us back to the tree of lives. But that's just low-hanging fruit, because I'm the first to determine that it was Yahweh who caused the fall of man. Now, climbing higher in the tree, I shared how God arranged man's ouster from the garden such that with woman, after billions of iterations, this would eventually evolve towards the desired result. Climbing to the top of the tree, I explained that our time out of and then back to the garden has transpired for a singular purpose, played out over 6,000 years. This is an opportunity for some men and women to become sufficiently interesting and reliable by being observant and listening to God, and then engaging and contributing something to the relationship, having fallen, having the wherewithal to prove that we can be trusted by standing up again, so that Yahweh can remove us from the Gan, this sheltered enclosure, even from the planet Earth itself, and allow some of us free reign throughout the universe, as well as access to Shamayim. Therefore, our journey isn't about seeking salvation, but instead striving to be interesting and trustworthy. For this to occur, God would have to give us the time and the space to learn, to grow, to experience both life and death, to accomplish something worthwhile, to fall and get up again, to show that we are worthy of his attention and that we can be trusted to follow instructions. So indeed, there would eventually be those willing to listen and engage accordingly, and they would consume this fruit and become family. The initial exemplar of all of this was actually Noach, which is why he was lifted above the fallen. The Nephilim, their name means to fall, achieving this distinction by listening to Yahweh and then doing as God had asked, even caring for the animals that God enjoyed so much in the process. And this would serve as a sign of the covenant, made apparent by the 7 colors of the rainbow. As they broke through the stormy clouds, you can see that menorah with the 7 colors of light of the rainbow spinning over my left shoulder. Even the 8 souls above the ark, they were symbolic of the 8 epochs of mankind's great adventure. It would take 6 millennia for enough of us to become interesting, to justify opening the Gan, this protective enclosure again. But the situation would be different this time, as the 7th millennia is our opportunity to get it right. For the tree of knowledge and the 8 individuals harvesting and sharing the fruit around him, those who were designated by the Shabuah harvest and the Taruw'ah gleaning, and now acknowledged again on Sukah, to properly equip the mortal remnant of humanity for the greatest opportunity of all. And that is when, beginning on the 8th day of Sukah shelters, those who have made a contribution, proven that they can be trusted, and who have become interesting by learning, can be emancipated, free to explore the cosmos with our Creator, and a fashion that is mutually beneficial because we're interesting, because we can be trusted at long last. Now, as a result, now you know why my collaboration with Yahowah would play out over 32 years, from 2001 to 2033, and then 8 years representing this transition through the 8th days of Sukah, and why it would require, well, so much effort, 100,000 hours already. It's still counting. I would have to demonstrate the level of devotion required to prove that men could be trusted to work as intended, never giving up, falling, but standing again, making mistakes along the way, learning from them, growing as a result of them, coming back to the same material we have reviewed a score of times, and then learning so much more from it at the right time that it's explosive. And our understanding of who we are, where we are, and what we need to do to get from here to there. In the process, sure, I'd be tripped up on occasion. I'd make some mistakes, all to show that I could dust myself off, correct the record, and grow from there, build upon that. God wanted someone to affirm that by listening to him and engaging accordingly, going to where his words lead, that we are capable of learning what would be required of us to be enriched and empowered and able and emancipated by him to the extent that we become 7-dimensional explorers. So yes, the Choter would have roots then and now, branching out and bearing fruit. He would compose a sign that God speaks of as the Nesh, and he would have a voice, thanks to the spirit of this day. All the while, the partnership between the trees, the love and respect shared between the Etz, Shayim, and Dayeth, it's going to endure forever. Their branches intertwined. While Noach would point the way, and Abraham would be shown the way, while Moshe would record the way, and the prophets would explain the way. It would be the fruit of Dowd and Yada that would nourish those along the way. Yes, the fruit of these trees is the covenant family. And Yahowah decides who has access to them and to it. So how do you like those apples? Collectively, what I've just shared with you is the pinnacle of human understanding pursuant to God. It's the reason for life. It is the essence of our existence. Do with this what you may. For reasons only God knows, I have been tasked with the responsibility. I shouldn't actually say that because God's actually made it quite clear as to what the reasons are. But nevertheless, I have been tasked with a responsibility I did not request, but I am not going to relinquish either, of reintroducing the world to Yahweh's name, while simultaneously restoring his son's place in our lives. And while that's good, it's also bad. This job entails warning the world against the mess that men have made. By necessity, I must tell the world that Jesus is not God, that Allah is actually Satan, that there is no Hashem, that Marxists and MAGAs are both wrong, and that the current POTUS is actually demonic. The earth is spiraling out of control, such that in the next 8 years, catastrophe and disaster, destruction and death will be the hallmarks of this time. And standing up against it all, weathering the storm, is the deeply rooted, strong branched tree of knowledge of good and bad. I'm doing my job. I'm producing fruit, and I'm sharing it with all interested parties. Never has any man ever been as productive pursuant to the things of God. Nevertheless, my retirement is still, 1 millennia and 8 years away. God doesn't shortchange anything now, does he? I've got another 8 years here in this world as we know it, and 1,000 years in the garden to equip as many people as possible to explore the cosmos with Yahweh. So while it seems a bit anticlimactic, there is more to this story that God wants you to know. And so to rejoin his narrative where we left off, it is instructive to know that Shama listening was cradled in the call imperfect and the third person masculine plural. Therefore, the implications are that the ones who are listening, who would listen to the ets, the trees representing Dowd and Yada, are those of you who are listening now. Ets, and they are masculine, and the Israelites and Goyim in the last days are also masculine, speaking of both groups of people. The result would play out over time because Shama was conveyed in the imperfect, and although nothing seemed to matter at the moment, it would 6,000 years thereafter. So having addressed the call of Yahweh, there is something more we can learn from halak. It was one of two successive verbs modified by the rare use of the hit payel stem. This means that both Yahweh and his call voice, while regarded as one, are unaffected by the wiles of man. It was true of Yahweh, having given up on Adam, and it is true now of his voice being incongruous with the religious and the political. And in the participle form, God's movement through space and time is having a vividly depicted effect such that it leaves an indelible impression on our minds. This is particularly germane regarding the narrative which took place within the enclosed garden, which is why the Ruach spirit is presented at this time. The fact is, this was Yahweh's last time to move above the garden, and he will not return to travel above it again until a remnant of Yisrael and some very fortunate Goyim are afforded that opportunity by the Choter, such that they can re-enter the garden and experience Yahweh's presence, particularly as it is represented through the Elyon, who is his beloved son, Dowd. Now, while it is subtle, there are a couple of reasons that Yahweh mentioned his spirit in conjunction with listening. This pertains to his relative location in time and the nature of the garden yesterday and tomorrow. Without the 7 Ruach of Yahweh, the Choter would not have been able to discern what billions have missed over the millennia. And without being slandered by those falsely claiming that the Ruach is a spirit mom, I would not have returned to this narrative at this time. Therefore, I would not have noticed the great discoveries that have resulted from this current investigation. This is why I have expressed and have recognized that Yahweh has noted with some extraordinary prophecies adroitly depicting what would be a fracture within the family, such that it serves a purpose, as did Chawah's flight of fancy and her rebellion on this day. We grow when we meet and rise above challenges. So, moving even deeper into the preceding narrative, while the story depicts Adam and Chawah together, it's the man who is shown as Chawah, withdrawing from God, because it was scribed in the third person masculine singular, as I mentioned previously. Further, since Chawah was modified by the hit payel stem, Adam is acknowledging that he is no longer being assisted by Chawah or influenced by God. This suggests that he, Chawah, decided to leave also on his own accord. So the parting was mutual between God and man. It didn't work out. All of this brings us right back to the Etz, the tree, which remains masculine and singular throughout. This text does not say that Adam was hiding among the trees, plural. He was ba-tawak, in the midst of the one tree in the garden, in the Gan. It was the one he coveted, apparently trying to consume as much of it as he could prior to being escorted out of the garden. Therefore, while Chawah was the first to bite, wanting to be a mother goddess in her case, Adam was anything but an innocent bystander. So we are also reminded of what this etz represents. The tree's purpose was to etzah, provide counsel and advice through diligence and effort on the entirety of the plan, ultimately framing the issues that God wanted understood, providing the right perspective to advise people regarding them. In the process, man would develop a backbone while overcoming challenges, all to advocate for the proper response. Sure, it would be painful at times, as he would trip and fall to demonstrate the resolve to rise again, risking being shut out because his message would be an open defiance of the schemes proposed by those deemed authorized. I think that's a good place for us to stop this particular program. We'll rejoin in Yahweh's next statement, which is recorded in Bereshith, Genesis 3:9. And it states that Yahweh, who is God, called out, issuing an invitation to read and recite. He karad, the verbal base of Mikra, the 7 invitations for us to be called out of this world and to meet with God. And he's made this proclamation to the man. And he asked him, where are you? He's asking you the same question. Thank you for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.